Hello and welcome to Newsclick. We have with us Professor Aijaz Ahmad and we are discussing the issues arising out of the recent ceasefire in Ukraine. Aijaz, the Ukraine ceasefire was quite sudden after the collapse of the Ukrainian front, or the Kiev regime's front, which was built up over some months. Do you think the ceasefire indicates a desire on the part of both sides to come and sit down and work out a solution, or is only a matter of reorganizing by the Kiev regime?
Well, from the side of the federalists, or whatever you want to call them, from the side of the opposition, I think that it's a very genuine desire to sit down and talk, because they have very, very precise, limited aims of maximum regional autonomy based on genuine federalization and restoration of historic relations with Russia, cultural, linguistic, and so on and so forth. Whereas, in my view, Kiev regimes has accepted this ceasefire basically because they were defeated on the ground. And the economic situation is beginning to pinch. That could be the additional reason, but they were defeated on the ground. Reorganization, yes, but they also know that in order to reorganize in a way that they can again pretend to be able to win, they have to be resupplied. They have to receive a lot more weaponry. They now have a very demoralized army. They have a very demoralized army and very angry neo-Nazi militias. So this combination they have to manage. The problem is that they are so much in the pocket of the United States, their policies are so much determined by the United States that they are not free agents. They cannot pursue the ceasefire, a peace agreement and so on, unless they get the go-ahead from the United States, which I don't believe they will. So I think it's a lull, it's a pause, and there will be another outbreak.
So the ceasefire may not hold. That is what you were really saying.
Yeah, I don't think it.
Unless, of course, there are other pressures, other changes, which is not apparent as of now. You know, this whole argument about the collapse of the Kiev army, and I'm specifically saying the Kiev army because I don't think it represents the whole of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are.
Yeah. So now, looking at that, there is the argument that the Western media, of course, the governments, the United States, the NATO powers, all have advanced, of course, Ukraine vociferously, that there was a sudden Russian invasion. Any proof of such an invasion? Or do you think it's a completely manufactured story to justify to their own people the fact that they lost?
This is Gulf of Tonkin.
Gulf of Tonkin.
Complete fiction. The only evidence that they have shown so far as I know, is a destroyed Russian tank. Where that picture was actually taken, when it was, etc. They absolutely know the evidence, and this is worse than this chemical attack in Syria, which was also a fiction. It would make sense that the Russians would in some way supply them with some arms or something, some surreptitious way or something. This would make sense, but we don't have the evidence. But invasion, most of the troops have gone back. The so-called president of this Kiev junta says, the State Department rebuts immediately and says at least 1,000 are still there. Where are they? You have satellite imagery here. Where are they?
It's interesting the way this plays out. Let's assume, for instance, 1,000 Russian army officers are there leading all these people in, having shed their Russian weapon and Russian uniform. The question is, there have been various mercenary forces with Ukraine, which our proof is there.
Absolutely.
So in what sense is it different? And here is the United States and its allies supplying rebels in Syria with arms, openly accepting it. And yet they are talking about this huge violation of international law because Russia, according to them, is doing the same.
Yes, what astounds me is that American and then British media had collapsed quite some time ago. It had just become mouthpiece of the... but Europe used to have, Germany and France in particular, used to have really serious media. They are talking of Russian invasion without any evidence. I mean, this is the degradation into which the EU is falling. It's remarkable. And the heart of the EU, I mean, France and Germany, these are very old institutions in these countries.
Other significant part of the ceasefire is that unlike earlier agreements, the West hardly played any role. In fact, the OSCE is there, but that also includes Russia. Only country apart from the Ukrainian government, the Kiev regime and the Lugansk, Donetsk regime, People's Republic's representatives, only the government body there which is representing the Russians.
Right.
So do you think that also is a shift that is Ukraine is being forced, or the Kiev regime is being forced to accept that without Russia there is no credible ceasefire or there is no credible politics?
On the ground that is true. On the ground that is true, that they have been forced to accept that. But the conditions in which they have been forced to accept it is that they had been defeated. So they desperately needed a ceasefire. If they didn't take a ceasefire, those armies could, those armies could march into Western Ukraine if they wanted. They had been defeated. They needed it. The West, dictated by the Americans, I am astounded, the main EU countries, their only interest was to use this fighting to announce more and more sanctions against Russia and economic warfare against Russia. So they would not even support a ceasefire in place. So, I mean, that's the situation in which the Kiev government, in a desperate move, accepted that the Russians, because the Russians were the only ones who were interested in that ceasefire.
Last question on this. Do you think, like Middle East, the policy of breaking up countries, small states, all this is also playing here? Break up Ukraine into smaller groups, let it fight, let the ethnic violence be unleashed and so on?
No, I don't think so. I think they want the fighting to go on to actually justify more and more and more of the stationing of high-grade NATO weaponry in these regions. They want perpetual fighting. They want more and more tensions, because the more bodies there are, the more they can whip up hysteria in their own countries. But if they, the logic of my argument is that if they were to agree to break up Eastern and Western Ukraine separately, then they have given this to Russia a debt.
Which they don't want to do.
Which they don't want to do. And Ukraine, what would be left of Ukraine then would be really a basket case. You could put as many missiles in it as you want, but that IMF loan that they completely contrary to all rules of the IMF, they gave a huge loan that will run out in a year.
And anyway, we have the winter now which will take place. Yeah. Gas supplies to Western Europe as well as to Ukraine is going to be a big issue.
Yes.
Already commercial fights are on that, particularly Ukraine.
Very big ones. Very big ones. Very big ones.
And the ability of the European governments to have solved the problem of Ukrainian commercial fights and have gas supplies coming through Ukraine seems to be rather
the two are not going to happen. You saw what happened with Poland. Poland sort of got up and said, we will give them the gas that we have been buying is our gas. We have bought it from Russia. The Russians said this is contrary to argument, and it is said that in practice they reduced the amount that was going in. 24 hours later, Poland backtracked. So this is going to happen.
Commercially, it's a violation of the agreement.
Absolutely.
In any case, Poland has no right to do it because Ukraine was reneging on its own contract.
That's right. And Poland does not have the right to give that gas to anyone else.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's a violation of the commercial contract. So anyway, it will be interesting to watch what happens, because I think the military situation having changed, the politics has changed. winter is going to bite, that puts Russia in an advantageous situation. Of course, the economic war is going to continue as it seems. So no change on the Western side, the NATO side, but some change on the ground.
But I must say one last thing. I really do not understand what the German game is, also France. Latest polls show that 85%, roughly 85% of the people in Germany and France are both against arming the Kiev junta, as well as bringing Ukraine into the EU.
EU and
that is what their populations are saying. What national purpose does this serve for Germany, which needs that gas and which needs that? I mean, my sense is that one of the major objectives of American foreign policy in this whole thing is to break the economic relationships between Russia and EU, because that is a very major area in which some degree of independence was developing, independence from the United States. What all of this, what purpose it serves for Germany, beats me.
So let's watch how it develops, whether the European allies show some independence or not, and how the military political equations in Ukraine play out between the two forces now. Thank you very much, Aijaz. We'll come back to this issue as and when the things develop further.
Thank you.